me first. My name's Dan Schmidt, as Mary said. And I'm here tonight to talk about Proposition 2. And the part I'm going to talk about, which is in the first, is kind of the history as to how we got here. How Idaho is in the situation it's in. And then Emily's going to speak the second half, because they've done all the work to get the initiative on the ballot to address this situation. And that's what we're trying to frame for you tonight. You will be faced with the issue. This initiative will be on the ballot in November, and people get to choose how to vote on it. So let's go back in history. Affordable Care Act passes in 2010. That was the first year I ran for office, 2010. And my goal in this history is not to be biased, but I think to explain this history, it's very important that everybody understand the Affordable Care Act passed Congress and was signed by the President without a single Republican vote. And that, in my opinion, flavors where we are today. And that's, I'm not going to say whether that was right or wrong, but that's the climate in which the Affordable Care Act passed. Affordable Care Act was a compromise between the federal government and the insurance industry with the goal of having everybody being insured. Private insurance industry said, we don't want to insure poor people. We're not used to insuring poor people. How can we solve that? The government offered, we'll put poor people on Medicaid. And then the deal was made. Well, there was a lawsuit that said Affordable Care Act's not constitutional. Goes to the Supreme Court. It was decided that the Affordable Care Act is constitutional, and that was a 5-4 decision, a close decision. But they gave a caveat, and they said it is constitutional to have the individual mandate and require people to have health insurance, but you cannot force the states to enroll people in Medicaid, because the Medicaid law is a state-federal partnership. Every state has certain twinges on how they do Medicaid in their state, the kinds of enrollment, how they offer it, and how the federal government compensates those states. So to hold the phrase in the Supreme Court decision was, you cannot hold a gun to the head of the states and require them to enroll people in Medicaid. So some states enroll people up to the poverty level. If you want to go on the exchanges, which is where individual health insurances are sold in every state, you must be above 100% of the federal poverty level. That's the federal law. That's the Affordable Care Act law. If you're below 100% of the federal poverty level, you are not eligible to participate in the exchange. And some states, right now I think it's 33 states, have expanded Medicaid eligibility up to, so that the people below the poverty level who cannot participate in the exchange are covered by Medicaid in their states. There are some states that have not expanded Medicaid. Idaho's one. And there are quite a few around the country that have not. And that's what this initiative is all about. This initiative proposes that Medicaid will be expanded to people up to 138% of the federal poverty level, and their health insurance will be provided through Medicaid health insurance. That's the background. Now there's some history here in Idaho. When this Supreme Court decision was made, Governor Otter just said, okay, let's look at this really hard. And he appointed 2 work groups. One was to study whether we should establish a state-based health insurance exchange. The other one was established to consider whether Idaho should expand Medicaid eligibility. Both groups met through the summer of 2012, and in the fall of 2012 made recommendations to the governor. The governor chose to move forward on establishing a state-based health insurance exchange. Idaho is one of the only states that is predominantly Republican that made that choice. And I was there for that debate in the Idaho legislature, and I have to tell you, that was a very bitter debate. It was brutal. but it passed. And the Republican-led legislature, in my opinion, quite courageously chose to set up a state-based health insurance exchange. It was very successful. Many people, actually it was the most successful state-based exchange in the country. Idahoans flocked to buy health insurance on their exchange for the first 3-4 years. This year they've seen a downturn in enrollment. So the other work group that met was the Medicaid work group, and we recommended to the governor, I was on that work group. There were 3 legislators on that work group and I was one of them. And we recommended that the governor consider expanding Medicaid eligibility for the state of Idaho. We had many presentations, lots of information. Fundamentally, and so the takeaway from me was a large consulting accounting firm called Milliman looked through all the numbers and made these presentations to us. And the guy who made the presentations kind of stopped in the middle of his PowerPoint and looked at us and he says, you know, I've done this in a lot of states. Because this is what we're just going around the country now and giving states advice. And Milliman is a very conservative group, both fiscally, and he looked at us on the board and said, you know, of all the states we've been to, this makes the most sense for Idaho because of Idaho's catastrophic and indigent fund. We are currently spending money on people who do not have insurance that other states don't do. Other states see people that are uninsured, they're cared for in the hospital, they get care, and those costs get shifted to the insured. So Idaho has fairly low insurance rates compared to other states, partly because Idaho taxpayers are paying for the uninsured right now through catastrophic and indigent care. So let's talk about indigent and catastrophic care because I was also on that board. I was appointed to the Idaho Catastrophic Healthcare Fund board in my first year in office, and you know, I knew what it was, but I had no idea what the work was like. And so every month and a half, we would get 150 to 200 applications from all the counties through the state, 44 counties. If somebody is injured or gets very sick and has no ability to pay, mainly the hospital can apply to the county for indigent coverage to cover the costs to care for this patient. The county is obligated under statute to pay for the first $11,000 of that coverage. If it's above an $11,000 bill, the balance goes to the state of Idaho. And the first year that I was on the CAT Fund board, we spent about $48 million paying for the uninsured in Idaho. The counties paid a very similar amount. As soon as we established a state-based exchange and people were getting insurance, those costs plummeted. They went down to almost $10 million, to a total of $10 million at the state level by the third year of the exchange. When we get health insurance, indigent costs go almost to nothing. But we didn't get everybody covered in the state of Idaho because we did not move forward with Medicaid expansion. The fight for the exchange was very brutal. At the end of that legislative session, another legislator and I went into the governor's office and said, we've had the fight, we know where the votes are, let's run the bill for Medicaid expansion right now. We got 2 weeks left in the session, let's do it. And the governor's office said, go for it. We're not going to support you. And we went, you're the ones who have to do it. It was me and another Democrat. And so there's no way 2 Democrats are getting that done in the Idaho legislature. So that wasn't going to happen that year. The next year, the governor appointed another work group, and I said, I'm not on it. Let's let other people learn these numbers. Let's let other people do this. At the same time, I'm continuing to review CAT Fund board cases, 120 every month and a half, 1,000 a year, Tens of millions of dollars were spent. And the cases are just, they're tragic. People, 45-year-old man goes into the emergency room feeling weak. It's discovered he has stage 4 colon cancer. So this man's very, very sick. And he's probably put this off a long time. And so I actually looked back through the cases for a year. Because the argument was, by not expanding Medicaid, you're killing people. And I thought, that's pretty harsh. How do we prove that? How do you really know? And so I looked back through the Cat Fund cases for a year. And I found, actually it wasn't for a year, it was just for 2 months. And in those cases, I found 12 people that, just from the generic small description, they had a treatable illness that, in my opinion, could have been treated much, much, much earlier, and they died. And it may have saved their life. It may have prolonged their life. I don't know. But in my opinion, the Cat and Indigent Care Fund, paying for costs for health care after the fact, not enrolling people in insurance, was unjust and incorrect. And Idaho needed to do things differently. So I spent another 3 years in the Idaho legislature. I reviewed health and welfare dollars on the Joint Finance Appropriation Committee. I felt like I did a good job maintaining those budgets, and I kept working to try to get the state to consider expanding Medicaid. And so in the last year in the legislature, my last year in the legislature was, let's see, I think it was 2016. And I printed personal bills. They got a hearing, which was a great gift from the chairman. There was a lot of interest, but again, it was not something that the legislature chose to do. That year, in 2016, I was sitting at a Cat Fund board meeting with a couple other people. One of them was Dick Armstrong, the head of Department of Health and Welfare. And I looked at Dick and I said, what do you think about an initiative? I think we could get this through with an initiative. And he goes, that's a great idea. And I said, and he couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I was exhausted. And I had to run for office that year. And I didn't have the energy or the enthusiasm to start an initiative plan. And in the spring of 2017, I was not in office, but I was approached by some people who did want to do an initiative. And I'll let Emily tell you about that.